you have any other questions, we'll jump right into the full episode.
I'm ready.
Cool. All right, guys, welcome back to the Be Lead, Be Real, Be Bold podcast. I'm honored to have my special guest from Washington, Jess Willmorth. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much. Now, we originally connected through Instagram, and I started to watch your story, and it was basically unfolding in front of me. And every day I was finding myself tuning in to what it is that is a big part of your life. Share a little bit about who you are with our audience, and tell us a little bit about why you're so passionate about.
So my name's Jess. I'm from Seattle, Washington. Super excited to be here. So thank you again. I'll probably thank you about 1,000 times. But the reason I started to share my story on Instagram, not just Instagram, but social media in general, so vulnerably, is because I went through a pretty tough health battle. It's about late 2017 when I unfortunately got very sick and was trying to kind of figure out why I was sick, what was going on. I was very depressed, full of anxiety, a lot of things that a lot of people have experienced before, but it was basically so severe to the point to where I was having a really hard time just making it through a single day. So it was beginning of 2018 that my health journey really started. I was like I said, I was depressed. I was anxious 24/7. I was working full time. I was still going to school full time. I was living in a duplex with my ex-boyfriend at the time. We had a dog. We were raising a puppy also at the same time. Our relationship, me and him, was already kind of rocky at this point. So we were dealing with, the struggles of a relationship, trying to keep that together. There was just like a lot of things going on in my life that were a perfect storm. And I actually remember one day getting home from work and telling him that I think what's going on, like everything going on in my life, is going to kill me. And that was kind of freaky because it was like from that point forward that my body started to just reject everything that I was doing. I ended up getting like allergic reactions to everything in life. That's kind of what the mast cell activation syndrome is that I got diagnosed with. I had never heard of this, but basically, if you can imagine everything you smell, eat, or touch making you break out into an allergic reaction. So it was a pretty wild month and a half of that, maybe even 2 months, trying to figure out why my body was so mad at me. Ended up going through multiple doctors to figure out what's going on. Ended up getting diagnosed about 10 months after starting searching with multiple tick-borne illness, and that really is what launched me into sharing my story on social media. It was also more of like a pay it forward type thing. I utilized people on social media to help me figure out what was going on. Some people may know this, some people may not know this, but conventional medicine is great for life-saving surgeries and things like that, but it's not very good at helping anybody with a chronic illness or helping you find your way. So all of the people who were sharing their stories of chronic illness on social media really helped guide me into finding out what was wrong with me. And when I got diagnosed, I was like, well, shoot, all of these people helped me. I need to start sharing my story so that I can potentially help somebody. And whether that's one person that reaches out to me that I can help or thousands of people, I don't really care, as long as I just pay it forward back to somebody else. So that's really how I started sharing my story and everything.
That's a powerful message and a mission. Thank you very much. Now, your energy changes from day to day. The way that you feel changes so often. What is a normal day, and what happens when it swings away from normalcy?
Okay. So a normal day is probably a terrible day for your average person, to be honest, when you're living with a chronic illness. My normal day usually starts by me waking up feeling like I didn't sleep. I don't think I've ever woke up feeling rested. So that's my normal way that I wake up every morning. Doesn't matter if I sleep for 2 hours, doesn't matter if I sleep for 10 hours. But I get up in the morning, I always make coffee, which is a bad habit. I really should cut that out, but I just can't help it. Always make my same coffee. I can't even deter from the coffee that I make. That's how specific it is every morning. And then I go to work. I work at a naturopathic clinic, so I work part-time at a naturopathic clinic. I go to work. I usually can only work about 5 hours max a day because that's all that my brain can really handle. If I work longer than that, it's sort of like different parts of my brain slowly start to shut down is almost what it feels like. And then when I get home from work, I usually make some food, go in my infrared sauna, or take a really hot detox bath, one of the two. And then usually I hop onto social media and start finding and connecting with people to see what I can do as far as like being an advocate for people with chronic illness. And then I go to sleep. It's really the same thing every single day, but it's what I'm comfortable with. It's what I can do right now. I'd say the bad days probably, well, I have two different types of bad days, I feel like. I have a bad day that I can kind of work through and get through. I do the same thing, but I just am a zombie while I'm doing it. So at work, it's usually about 3 hours I can last on a bad day. And then when I get home, I don't really do the social media stuff. I kind of just turn everything off, turn my lights off, and kind of hibernate is what I like to call it. My friends and my family know when I have these days. They're used to them. They know, like, okay, we can't really bother her today. She needs her time. But I mean, sometimes my bad days get even worse than that, to where I'll wake up in the morning, I'll instantly know if it's going to be a really bad day, and I will call into work. They're luckily very understanding because it's a naturopathic clinic that works with people with chronic illness. So they get it. When I have a bad day, they let me stay home, and I probably get out of bed maybe to pee and make some food, and that's it on those days. So it definitely varies, but I live a pretty low-key life.
And you alluded to modern medicine, Western medicine, being great for acute surgeries or emergency situations. And I'm led to believe that you're not taking too much medication. Are you replacing that with nutrition and more of the natural path?
Definitely. So it's kind of tricky because with tick-borne illness specifically, there's not a known cure for it. There's not a known way that's the most effective at managing it. So it's kind of like trial and error. And the other weird part of it is that everybody or different things seem to help different people. So something that helps somebody else with Lyme disease might not help me. And you don't know until you try, which is kind of frustrating. But one of the treatment options that's pretty well known is actually taking antibiotics. So when I was really sick and I first found a Lyme doctor, they actually started me on oral antibiotics, and I took those for an entire year, which is absolutely insane to me. Obviously, I was doing a bunch of other things to try to help protect, my body while I was putting the antibiotics in. But I didn't necessarily agree with it because I am very, all about the natural, holistic type healing. But at that point, I was so sick that I was like, I don't even care what you do to me. Just do something that's going to make me feel better. So I did do that for a year. I couldn't tell you if it helped or not. I think I'm probably about maybe 40% better than I was before I started them. So yeah, maybe it helped, maybe it didn't. But ever since, I think I did a year, and then I was like, okay, I don't feel comfortable doing this any longer. People are scared to take antibiotics for a week, and I took them for an entire year. And so I was like, I don't feel comfortable with this anymore. I can't do this to myself. So now I strictly use nutrition. I'd say that's probably the number one thing. I can't tell you how many of my symptoms have gone away since I changed my diet. And that's something that I don't think a lot of people really know or realize how much it can help you, especially with my anxiety and my depression. Ever since I changed my diet, that stuff has not really been an issue, and that absolutely blows my mind. But yeah, and then I use different holistic healing tools like infrared sauna. I take a bunch of different herbal supplements to help support my system, and coffee enemas are another huge thing that I do. So that, yeah, there's a bunch of different holistic type of natural treatments that I utilize now.
Mm-hmm. For your nutrition program, are you focusing on eliminating only inflammatory foods, or are you going much deeper than that, much more strict than that?
So how it started was I changed my diet. Basically, it was probably one of the first things I did when I got sick. And that is because I was having allergic reactions to everything I was eating. So I was having to cut out 99% of the foods because everything was making me sick. So I actually ended up eating white rice and plain chicken for every meal for about 2 months straight. And it was the most insane thing I think I've ever done. But it helped like so much. And then once I went through that, and my allergic reactions pretty much subsided and kind of went away with everything else I was doing. But I was like, dang, that was pretty amazing how much better even just that made me feel. And so when I was slowly starting to reintroduce things, I also got one of those food intolerance tests done because I had heard how amazing that those can be. So I got one of those done. That actually showed that I was intolerant to about 75% of foods that there even is. So that was a big blow. So I immediately had to take out a lot of food. I think one of the biggest weird parts of my nutrition, because there's a lot of there's a lot of people that believe in like the vegan diet or the plant-based diet, which I love plant-based. I totally believe in eating your fruits and vegetables like crazy. But beef actually was one of the foods that I was least like intolerant to. So I actually ended up eating a lot of beef, and vegetables and fruit that's basically my diet now, honestly. I did actually go carnivore for a month straight too, and probably felt the absolute best I've ever felt, but I couldn't keep it up.
It's hard to sustain with all of that one macronutrient. Are you reincorporating grains at all?
So I do rice. I've always kept rice in. Rice is, I think, the only grain that I eat. Yeah. It's the only one I eat is rice.
Mm-hmm. So you've got a lot of responsibility, and you're super young. How old are you, Jess?
27.
27. That's what I thought. So you've got a lot of responsibility, and you mentioned an ex-boyfriend before, and also when we were getting to know each other, maybe our questionnaire ahead of time, you said too much to handle.
As far as him?
And you could definitely clue us into what happened there with him, but maybe that's what you were speaking to when you said what holds people back in relationships. All this responsibility with a new partner seems like too much to handle.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a big fear of mine now dating, now that I do have all of these responsibilities. Kind of what happened with my ex. I mean, he was there for it when it was the worst, you know. We had been together almost 4 years at the point when everything went downhill. And he's a great guy, has a great heart. I don't think you can really, I mean, you can't plan for chronic illness, right? It hit me out of nowhere, which hit him because he was my partner. And neither of us really knew what we were getting into or how to handle it properly. And yeah, it kind of got to the point where he wasn't able to understand why I wasn't able to do certain things anymore. Like he wanted to go on all these vacations and eat out at all these places and travel the world and just spend all of our money on experiences and things. And it was a hard hit for him, I think, with me being like, I can't go on that vacation. I can't spend my money on that because I now need to spend my money on these supplements or these other things. And I can't go hiking on a Saturday anymore because it's my only day of the week where I can actually rest because I work all week. and I need that time to rest for myself. And it did get to the point too where I was so sick that I was unable to be sexually active anymore too. So we went about 2 months at the tail end of our relationship without that part of a relationship. And that, I think, it was just like the cherry on top for him to be like, I can't do this anymore. So it was rough, but at the same time, you know, you don't want to be with somebody that's not going to be there for you completely through the hardest time of your life. So moving on.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. That had to have been tough at the time.
Mm-hmm.
What's dating been like since?
Oh, it's been so tough. So tough. So him and I broke up in, oh gosh, year and a half ago. It was around October of 2018, I think. Yeah, because it was around the same time I actually got diagnosed with everything. I took about 3 months to myself, and I was like, screw men. I'm just going to focus on my health, do my own thing. So then I kind of started doing the dating apps. I had never done them before because 4 years ago when I was single, they were like just becoming a thing, and I hadn't used them. So it was a whole new experience to me that I was not liking at all. And my life every day is very inconsistent. So I would go on these dating apps for a few days. I would be like, okay, I'm going to go on these dating apps and I'm going to talk to all of these people and like really get into dating. And then I would have a bad day and I'm like, I don't want to talk to anybody. And so then I would like end up not logging into the app for like 3 weeks because I just lose motivation. And then I'd come back onto the app like, hey guys, you're still there? And I realized that was not a good tactic to use when you're using those dating apps, because people just like, if you don't jump on it, there's so many options nowadays with those dating apps that it's just ridiculous. So it's been very, very difficult to learn those dating apps. Not only that though, but having the chronic illness and I think it was because the way that my ex and I sort of, you know, went down, it makes me pretty fearful to kind of let other men in on what's going on. I'm having a huge debate with myself every day of like, when do I tell somebody about how I have to live my life? So that's a huge struggle.
Mm-hmm. What if I totally get where you're coming from with the apps, that like we get overwhelmed by choice, and then when we're not able to share authentically and vulnerably or transparently what is actually going on in our lives, we won't find somebody who has grace or compassion for that
Mm-hmm.
and is patient enough to wait 3 more weeks for you to log back in.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because it's just on to the next, on to the next. The angry therapist John Kim calls us baseball cards when we're on apps.
That's how it feels. Totally.
Like they're just looking at your stats on the back of the card. Okay, how many homers did you hit this year?
Mm-hmm.
Or what's a whole lot of other stats, stolen bases. You know, the baseball analogy and dating goes a long way.
Oh, for sure.
Mm-hmm. So I'm with you. I'm totally with you on that one. What if instead of initiating conversations on a dating app, people reach out to you through Instagram, where you're already authentically sharing your mission and your message, and they buy into you long before they even approach you?
I don't think I've honestly really had that happen. The only people I've ever had like reach out on Instagram are people that have been very creepy about it. Unfortunately, I do think that would be a great thing for me because, and I will say at a certain point when I have been talking to people on the app, I have been like, hey, you should follow me on Instagram, because that's an easy way for them to see my life without me having to explain it. And I figure if they start following me on Instagram, they see my story, and then they're not really making an effort after that, well, that's my clue where it's like, okay, well, now that they saw that, they're like, whoa, I don't know if I can deal with all that. I'm going to take a step back. So, but there has been some guys that have been great about it. So, but yeah, message me on Instagram would probably be a good way, as long as you're sincere and, you know, saying something about my story rather than saying something creepy.
Right. And the way that you authentically and vulnerably share on Instagram is really weeding out the people who are not meant for you long term anyways.
Mm-hmm.
So I totally get what you're saying about, like, that's a good way to get to know you better, taking it from the app onto Instagram,
Mm-hmm.
driving some connection, but not necessarily setting the conversation up to happen there in Instagram. It has to
Yeah,
take another level after that, right?
exactly. I did actually have, when I first started doing that, I was confiding in my best friend about the whole dating and everything. And I was like, I just don't get it. Like, I give them my Instagram and they see my story and they just stop responding. And like, it was, you know, it's a bummer when people do that to you. It, no matter how much you have known them or start to like them or anything, it still kind of hurts when people do that. Because we're human. Of course it's going to hurt. I was talking to my best friend about it, and she's like, well, don't you realize it's like a perfect way to like weed people out and not waste your time with somebody? And I was like, I mean, yeah, you're right, but still, it kind of sucks.
One good thing I love about that philosophy that your friend was telling you about is that it doesn't put you in like chase mode.
Mm-hmm.
It puts you in attraction mode. And like the people not meant for you, that's not your person anyways,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And I'm not sure if you were familiar with the Enneagram before I sent you the link or before I asked you about your peacemaker personality type.
A little bit, not too much. I will say I took that test like 2 years ago, and I was actually a 3. And then I've taken it 2 other times since then, and I was a 9. So I'm like, I don't know.
It's a possibility that you could be either, for sure,
Mm-hmm.
because when a 3 becomes disintegrated, they become more like a 9. But
Mm-hmm.
when a 9 becomes integrated, you know, it's a very fluid personality test. And that's why I enjoy it so much.
Mm-hmm.
And why I bring it up is I'll just speak to it from my perspective, from my lens of the Enneagram as a challenger, the 8. We're right next to each other on the Enneagram. My daughter's a 9. She has a really hard time showing up and
Mm-hmm.
being seen. You don't have that problem.
Interesting.
Yep. Where I come into the picture of like, we connected on Instagram and I noticed the energy that you were bringing to your posts, and it caught my attention as an 8 because when I'm integrated, I root for the underdog and I champion for the little guy.
Okay.
So then when you started posting about your fundraiser that you do in May every year, this will be the second year now, the challenger in me that's integrated is like, how can I help Jess share her message with another community outside of Instagram or through our Instagram handle at Believe, Be Real, Be Bold? But like, that's how a community grows. And that's one of our missions. I'm sorry, that's one of our values here at the podcast is community. Does
So
that make sense that like somebody like me, not for dating reasons, but would reach out and say, your message resonates, it lands with me, here's why, let's do something about it?
I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think even you mentioning your daughter not being able to show up sometimes, I do think I have a lot of moments like that where I kind of second guess my reasoning for sharing my story and doing the things on social media. I mean, even the day that I started sharing my story was absolutely terrifying to me. And I sat for about 4 hours with my posts written out on my phone and was like, I don't know if I can do this because I don't want anybody to hate on me for it. You know, I feel like I'm always been sort of a people pleaser in that sense. But with her
No,
not
the
being able to
mama
show
bear
up,
way.
yeah. But like with not being able to show up, every now and then I have people like you who reach out to me on social media and say like, oh, like, you know, your story is inspiring, or how can I help you share? And that is what gives me that boost to keep going all the time, honestly. So it's people like you that I'm super, super thankful for, because you give me that like kick in the ass every now and then again.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you. And one of the pieces of the community that I feel like I fall short on is sharing using the platform for what I built it for in the first place. Our platform at the podcast is to share people's messages and missions and visions for their life. And we simply just touch on the dating part of it because it's so relevant. And in our conversation today, you know, we get the opportunity to talk about dating from your context with a chronic illness. And this platform of podcasting is so powerful that our interview, our conversation will never go anywhere. And when I buy into somebody's mission that I see on social media or see it within our community, that's my opportunity to take a step further into the purpose of why I created it in the first place and say, more people need to hear this message right here, right now. How can I do that?
I think that's amazing. And the way that you're explaining it is like totally making me more knowledgeable about the type 8 too, because I didn't really know anything about that. But the way that you're explaining it makes a lot of sense.
But only when I'm healthy. Like when I'm disintegrated, I go more into like what's known as the investigator or type 5, where I'm just like, I got to get all the knowledge right here, right now, so that I can prove that I'm right. Well, the podcast is a beautiful place and a platform for me to completely integrate myself away from that. Not in an avoidant way, but in a personal growth kind of way of like, I'm still investigating. I'm still looking for answers that continue to come up in my life through relationships, because I believe that's where we learn the most about ourselves, is both within solitude and in a partnership or a relationship, because we can't grow without mirrors and reflections on ourselves. But when I started the podcast, it was because I knew I didn't know everything. And it came from a place of humility and being humble and saying, you know what, Jackie and Jess, they were my first two guests. I knew them on social media. And I said, hey, girls, will you come help me spread the message of what people are missing out on in their relationships and in their dating life? And now that we're growing past that, like we were talking about Shelly's episode, and she's been married for 6 or 7 years, maybe longer. I went to the wedding. I don't want to talk about how I behaved that night. Too many vodka tonics later or whatever. But you know, it's more about relationships and how do we build the best relationships? Because we're not always just going to be dating at one point in our lives. We're hopefully leading into something more meaningful than just dating.
I know that I had to learn a lot. I mean, I learned a lot from my last relationship with everything that went down. I knew that going forward, I needed to communicate a lot better. That's for sure, because at the time I wasn't able to communicate effectively what I needed when I was so sick. And I know that that was a huge issue. So I think that's why I'm putting so much stress on when do I bring this up to somebody, because it is important to me that I'm able to communicate what I need. I know that I've made mistakes before with like starting to date somebody new, and then I put my needs on the back burner because I'm focused on dating them and, you know, making sure that goes well. And I'm worried that what I need will get in the way of that. So that's something that I'm super struggling with and trying to figure out right now while dating.
That's a key piece of the peacemaker, is like, you're trying to keep the peace between yourself and this new relationship that you have hope for. Maybe you're not completely invested in, and that's okay. That's actually a good place to be, is not necessarily putting everyone's needs before your own. And I was just recently speaking to one of our former guests on his follow-up episode, and we came up with this concept of dare to risk the relationship without threatening it.
That makes a lot of sense.
And I think that might actually apply here. And if you don't mind, I'll share that with you.
Yes, definitely.
So maybe you're 2 or 3 dates in and you're not connected on social media, or if you are, and they bring up a question of curiosity and they're like, hey, share just a little bit more about you and what you share on social media. Or come at it and say, hey, I'm really passionate about this, fill in the blank, and I share it on social media. And what you're doing at the time is you're coming up from a place of personal alignment with your mission, your vision, and your purpose in your life. and you're opening up this opportunity or creating space between you and the new person that you're dating for them to either step in and step up or step out. And what we're doing is we're daring to risk the relationship at that time, early on, 2 or 3 or 4 dates in, without saying, okay, this is my life experience right now. This is who I am. This is the biggest part of my life. If you can't handle that, I want you to walk away right now. That would be threatening the relationship. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you come at it from a different perspective of, I'm daring to risk losing this person here 3 or 4 dates in because they can't step into that space I've created and step up and be a partner.
That is something that's extremely helpful, and I need to remember that going forward for sure. I did have a moment probably, I think when I first became single and I had first started dating again. I have a really close guy friend where him and I always swap dating stories and always, try to make light of terrible things that happen in our dating lives when we're hanging out together. And he was telling me about this girl he was seeing and how her life was like such a mess, and she was, always complaining about, something that was going wrong, blah, blah, blah. And I looked at him and I was like, my life's a mess. Like, and this was when things were even more of a mess than they are now. It's like, my life's a mess. Like, what does that say for guys that I'm trying to date? And I remember he looked at me and he was like, your life may be a mess, but you really do well in owning it. Like, you're like, this is my situation. You can either take it or you can leave it. So at that moment, I was like, dang, really? That's what I put off? Like, that's pretty cool. Because of course, me personally, I'm like, I don't feel like I was putting it off like that. But that was a big eye opener for me, because I was like, here he is telling me that it's okay if you're not perfect. It's okay if you're not doing everything right. But as long as you're standing by your truth and you're being truthful and you're saying, hey, this is my life. This is what I have to offer. You can stay or you can leave. Doesn't make a difference for me. So I was really happy when he told me that. Made me feel a little bit better about how I've been approaching everything.
That's so great. That's awesome to have a friend as a resource like that. Can I ask a follow-up question?
Yeah.
Okay. So how do you prefer to date? Do you like to date one person at a time, or keep your options open and date multiple people?
I think I've definitely tried both ways. I'd say if I was healthy, I'd probably prefer dating multiple people, because I feel like you get answers faster maybe that way, but also maybe you don't. I'm not sure.
What answers are you talking about?
Well, I'm just saying you're getting to know more people faster, right? So rather than maybe missing out on getting to know somebody else because you're seeing this one person, so you're not paying attention to anybody else. And I don't mean like being in a relationship with them. I would not be in a relationship with multiple people. That's not what I'm getting at. I'm just saying, like, maybe going on dates with different people at the same time.
I understand what you mean, for sure.
Okay, good. I just mean, like, with my current state of health, I cannot juggle multiple people. I get really stressed out if multiple people, like, text me and ask me to go on a date. Then at that point, I sort of retreat, and that's when I don't show up for 3 weeks, because I'm like, I can't handle this pressure. I can't, go on all these dates. So I definitely prefer sticking with one person and seeing that out.
Mm-hmm. I hear what you're saying totally. It's called the paradox of choice, where if we have too many choices, we can't make a choice at all.
That's me.
Uh-huh. And I'm getting this from a previous podcast episode called Overwhelmed by Choices with Meredith. She's from New York City. But why I asked that follow-up question is, yes, you're absolutely correct. You will find answers very quickly if you're dating multiple people at one time, so that you can maybe possibly have the intention of narrowing it down to one of the 2 or 3. Sound about right? Whereas what you were talking about is dating one person for maybe a month or 2, you're missing out on that month or 2 to explore somebody else. And then you have to go through another month or 2 with the new person. And instead of concurrently, they're consecutively. And I understand what you mean about that time frame of like, okay, well, instead of spending 4 months dating 2 people, I'm going to spend 2 months dating 2 people.
Exactly.
It's a very smart choice, and you're going to stay as long as you have boundaries around that situation. It could possibly totally be in alignment with yourself as long as you're communicating with your people that you're dating. And why this applies to what we've been talking about so far of like, can't do the dating apps because of overwhelming messages. And then when you don't feel healthy, you you may come across as you ghosted them, but that's not the case at all because they just don't know enough about you to understand
Exactly.
where you're coming from. So we're going to kind of pull this all together just a little bit in one big point of, if somebody were to come to you through Instagram, maybe 2 or 3 guys at the same time come to you, they're polite, they're sincere, and they say, Jess, your message really resonates with me. I've been following you on Instagram for a month now. Finally got the courage to reach out. It gives you the opportunity to choose from fewer people because they're coming to you as opposed to you using the apps to find the same 2 or 3 to choose from, which is why we're stuck in this paradox of choice of like, how much effort, how much work do I have to put in to find the same 2 or 3 people? And I love that we're taking ourselves out of chase mode, out of fear mode, and into abundance and alignment and attraction instead. Does that
Yes.
make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So I don't hate on your strategy of just like, I'm going to do me. I'm going to put out my story and see what comes back to me. And so far it's been a whole lot of partnerships, a whole lot of products or brands that want to work with you. It's brought a few creepy people, but you've got decent boundaries from what I'm hearing. And then it's also brought a few other people that are like sincerely reaching out and saying, I'd like to get to know you better. So I say, stick with it.
I think I'm on a pretty good roll. As of now, I'd say I think I have the last week felt a little bit overwhelmed again, honestly. But I think that also comes with how my health is doing in general. When I'm feeling better, dating's easier. When I'm feeling more sick, dating seems a lot harder. So it's just something that I need to learn how to balance effectively, honestly.
That's your existence moving forward. And finding a partner who is willing to step up to that, it takes time.
Definitely does. I mean, I've been single for almost 2 years now, which I mean, before I'm thinking back to like the last time I was single, I was single for like maybe 5 months. So this is, I think, the longest I've actually been single, but I'm also a lot more careful right now about who I choose to keep around me because of everything going on. So I guess it makes sense.
I'm so glad we got the opportunity to talk about dating with a chronic illness. I do have one specific question about Lyme disease, if you don't mind me asking.
Of course.
Is there currently no insurance that covers the health, or I'm sorry, the treatments?
So insurance will cover like antibiotic treatment to a certain extent. They don't like how long you're taking it. Luckily, they covered all my antibiotics for the year that I took them, but I have heard stories of people who have been on antibiotic treatments and insurances have come back and been like, why are you taking these for so long? We're not going to cover these anymore. But anything outside of antibiotics, they don't cover. So there's a whole lot of holistic treatments that they won't touch. And I don't know, of course, the whole reason why they don't cover them. I do know that a few of the Lyme doctors that I've talked with, they are not contracted with insurance, mainly because if they were to try to get contracted with insurance, then the CDC basically has a say-so about how they treat their patients. And there's a lot of treatments that they want to do that the CDC doesn't believe in. So that's why they stay away from the insurance. Makes it more expensive for us, but they can also treat us in the way that they think is right. So it's a weird battle going on.
And a big part of your mission is spreading that awareness and spreading awareness to other people who aren't diagnosed, because it presents so much like other chronic illnesses.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I think if you keep spreading awareness and it gets out there enough, then hopefully the CDC and insurance companies will be able to cover treatments eventually, and that we'll still be able to get the treatment we need, but get it paid for. That's the ultimate goal. So I think that we can get there. I actually just saw in a White House briefing by Trump that he actually was talking to one of the senators there about Lyme disease, which is like the first time it's ever been mentioned that high up. So that was pretty amazing. That went across social media like crazy when that happened.
Mm-hmm. Now, you are also a member or part of some groups that support people through this challenge, right?
Mm-hmm. I am.
How do people get involved with that, and what's been the biggest benefit for you?
So the main group that I've been working with right now is Generation Lyme, and they're basically a group of people battling Lyme disease that decided that they wanted to give people a platform to become part of the community. And so they started hosting weekly Zoom meetings where if you are battling tick-borne illness, or even if you know somebody that's battling tick-borne illness, you can hop onto their Zoom calls and chat with. There's usually about 20 other people on them right now. Just chat with people and get to know people, and connect with people that are dealing with the same things that you or your family member or your friend might be dealing with. It's takes some time. I mean, like we were talking about earlier, it's hard to know how to find these things. Sometimes you just come across an Instagram page and you're like, oh, that's awesome and that's useful, and you don't really know how you even came across it. I always tell people that if they're looking for resources, I mean, I've spent about 2 years now looking for these resources myself. So if anybody ever needs help finding those resources, I do have a lot now, luckily, and I will be like more than happy to share those with anybody that's looking for them.
And is the best way to get a hold of you on social media at healingjess_?
Yeah, Instagram is the best way. That's my main platform.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so very much, Jess, for spending the time with me. I'll be sure to put all of your contact information in the show notes in the blog post.
Awesome.
But if there's one thing you want to leave us with today, what would that be?
That would probably be one of the biggest lessons that I learned throughout my journey, is that community is entirely like so important to your well-being. I know before I got sick that I can take on this world by myself. I don't need anybody else. I can figure everything out on my own. That was my mentality. And after going through the health battle, I was scrambling to find anybody that could lend a helping hand to me. And now I realize how important that is. So I think you just shouldn't be scared to ask for somebody to hold your hand. You shouldn't be scared to message that random person on Instagram that you think might have an answer for you for what's going on. Just really use the resources in the community on social media if you are somebody who is looking for answers or needing help with anything, and that goes beyond chronic illness.
Very well said. I really appreciate you connecting with me today, and we'll do all that we possibly can to help your May 2020 fundraiser and in the future take off and really succeed.
Thank you. Super excited about it. I got a lot of work to do today to get ready for it.
Well, keep us up to date and let us know how we can help.
I definitely will. Thank you so much for everything.
You bet.